My next patron question is from Daniel, who wants to know why three specific animated films did not perform better at the box office. I remember you mentioning that 2D movies like Atlantis, Lost Empire, Titan, Treasure Planet, and Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas were box office failures not because of the medium, but mainly due to the sci-fi action-adventure genre, which did not appeal to moviegoers at the time. Instead, they preferred animated family comedies, with Lilo and Stitch and Brother Bear being examples of 2D box office successes in the early 2000s. I agree with your point. However, the 2D comedy genre did not turn The Road to El Dorado, The Emperor's New Groove, and Home on the Range into box office successes either. It seems no one talks about why these films failed at the box office, even though they were not focused on sci-fi action-adventure themes. I understand that some of these films received lukewarm reviews at the time, like El Dorado and Home on the Range, and had high budgets that hindered their ability to break even. Aside from the reviews and budget, what other factors contributed to the poor box office performance of each of these three 2D comedy animated films compared to early Pixar films, Shrek, Ice Age, Lilo and Stitch, and others? Like the question mentioned, I've talked before about how audience taste in animated films shifted largely towards comedies, and that was a major reason certain movies took off and others did not. Daniel was right, though, that a few animated comedies underperformed too. With The Road to El Dorado, I admit I'm still perplexed why it did not attract a bigger audience. It was certainly not for lack of trying on DreamWorks' part, as I remember they promoted the film a lot in the lead up to the release. I myself saw it in theaters, and I was surprised to learn years later that it was a box office disappointment. You cannot pin it on family film competition, because aside from Fantasia 2000's exclusive IMAX run and My Dog Skip, which had already been out for several weeks, Road to El Dorado was largely to itself until the Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas opened on its fifth weekend. And Viva Rock Vegas did even worse than El Dorado. So this one is admittedly perplexing, but maybe the trailers and TV spots did not attract the average viewer, and the hook of two goofy Spaniards who end up in a lost city of gold was not something that grabbed people on initial release. The film also got a B+ CinemaScore from opening night audiences, which is an underwhelming grade for a family film. DreamWorks seemed to do a better job of selling Chicken Run a few months later, which also had stronger word of mouth. The Emperor's New Groove is a notable case of Disney not knowing exactly the right angle to market the film. Remember, that film had an infamously troubled production, with the filmmakers making so many adjustments on the fly to get it to the finish line and ultimately giving us the wacky, hilarious comedy it ended up becoming. Kuzco is a pretty unlikable character through most of the film, so they had to sell audiences on that, with the posters even specifically depicting him as a selfish attention hog. Disney also released posters with taglines like Llama Llama Ding Dong. When the movie opened, How the Grinch Stole Christmas was still playing strong, so New Groove had to deal with that. However, a remarkable thing happened, and the people who did see it loved the film, recommended it to others, and it had impressive staying power at the box office. The home video release was a big seller, and its television premiere on ABC a year later pulled in strong ratings. So The Emperor's New Groove was a case where it was slow going at first, but it did not take long to find an audience, and Disney seemed happy enough with the film's eventual viewership to later produce a direct-to-video sequel and television series. It's why I always find it odd when people say New Groove is underrated, because the film was beloved by both critics and audiences since it was released. As for Home on the Range, I think the issue with that movie was it was seen as too juvenile. The animated films that were doing really well at the time had some adult appeal, while that film seemed to skew a tad younger. Not to mention its plot of three cows who become bounty hunters is not exactly one that screams box office gold. But looking at the animated comedies that did extremely well, they all had something that managed to grab the audience's attention. There was Shrek and its parody of fairy tales, which stood out to viewers after a decade of animated Disney films based on them. Lilo and Stitch had that brilliant marketing campaign of Stitch invading the other Disney movies and messing with them. And for Ice Age, there was that clever idea of having the teaser consist of the opening scene with Scrat. It was a great way to introduce the concept to viewers, and Scrat proved to be an immensely appealing character with his pursuit of that acorn. I would argue Scrat is maybe even more pivotal to the success of that franchise than Manny, Sid, and Diego are. I don't think the other three animated films had quite those same hooks. It really is an example of how many factors are key in making a movie successful, even when it seems to tick the right boxes in what audiences want. Thank you for your question, Daniel.